November 1939, the best-selling comic book on the newsstands was Marvel Comics #1, second printing, with an unbelievable sale of 800,000 copies, making one of the best-selling comic books ever at this time. There were a few new series debuting and new publishers, in fact. Best Comics #1, November 1939, published by Better Publications. This was the very first comic book published by the prolific publisher Better Comics, also known as Standard Comics and Nidor Comics. The gimmick of this comic was it was published in a horizontal format. It was slightly larger than the usual Golden Age comic, measuring 10 and 11 by 16ths wide by 8 inches high. This unique sideways square-bound book contains the first appearance of the Red Mask, which is also the first appearance of a minority superhero. This book also features humor and text features. This book is considered scarce by both Overstreet and Gerber. Volume 1, #1 with a 10-cent cover price, was a 68-page book with an on-sale date of September 1st, 1939. The editor at Better Publications was Ned Pines. Adventures of the Red Mask is featured on the cover. It is an early superhero comic book cover, and the cover features the Red Mask, Silly Willy, Peggy Wow, Jigger, Happy, and Pappy. The Red Mask is introduced in a 7-page story written by George West, featuring the first appearance of the hero, the Red Mask, and the villain, Robert Fear. And the Red Mask is the first known published African-American comic book masked hero. Happy is a 2-page story written and drawn by Ken Platt. It's a humor story and features the first appearances of Happy and the dog Pappy. Happy appears 5 times in this issue. Ken Platt, born 1911, lived until 2003, an American writer and artist best known for penning radio comedy and animated TV series, as well as children's mystery novels. He broke into comic books with humor stories featuring the character Happy in Best Comics #1 in 1939. Platt went on to write and draw many features in the next few issues, and to draw such features as Captain Future in Startling Comics, The Mask, featuring a attorney-turned-costume crime fighter in Exciting Comics, and writer Richard Hughes' Doc Savage-like Doc Strange, which has no relationship to the later Marvel Comics Doctor Strange. After doing World War II military service, Platt began working for such comic companies as Timely Comics, for which he created Widget Witch in Comedy Comics, and he also created Super Mouse in 1948, and would eventually write for the Bob Hope and Jerry Lewis comics at DC Comics in the 1950s. Peggy Wow is an 8-page story written and drawn by Ray McGill, and this is the first appearance of Peggy Wow. Jigger is an 8-page story written and drawn by Gus Judd, featuring the debut of Jigger. And The Jams is a 9-page story featuring the first appearance of Mr. and Mrs. Jim Jams. Blue Ribbon Comics #1, November 1939, published by MLJ Comics. This is the very first MLJ comic ever published. The company would later be known as Archie Publications. This comic features the first appearances of Dan Hastings, Richie the Amazing Boy, and Rangatang the Wonder Dog, who also stars on this stylized cover. Golden Great Jack Cole contributes interior art as well to this issue. This is a 68-page, 10-cent cover price book which went on sale September 18th, 1939. The editor at MLJ was Louis Silberkleit and Harry Chesler. There's a Mile High pedigree copy of this book, as well as a Carson City pedigree, a Larson pedigree copy, and a Denver pedigree copy. Meet Rangatang is featured on the cover. This animal detective mystery featuring the dog Rangatang. Hold That Line is a 1-page story written and drawn by Jack Cole. Rangatang appears in a 6-page story written by Norman Danberg, with art possibly by Ed Ash, in this animal detective mystery, featuring the first appearances of Rangatang the dog and the detective High Speed. Dan Hastings appears in a 10-page story drawn by Clem Greder. This early science fiction strip features Dan Hastings and Dr. Carter. Buck Stacy is a 5-page story drawn by W.M. Allison. It's a Western frontier story featuring the first appearance of Buck Stacy. Foxy Grandpa appears in a 2-page story written and drawn by Jack Cole. Secret Agent B.O. is the title of the I'm a Sleuth 3-page story written and drawn by Jack Cole, featuring the first appearance of I'm a Sleuth, and this strip will next appear in Dynamic Comics number 11. King Cole's Court is a 2-page story written by George Nagel with art by Jack Cole, and this series is continued from Chesler's earlier Star Comics. Little Nemo is 4 pages written and drawn by Bob McKay, featuring the classic strip, and the villain, the Man in the Moon. The Murderous Red Keenan Gang is the title of the story for Crime on the Run, which is a 7-page strip written and drawn by Jack Cole. It's a non-fiction crime story featuring the Keenan Gang as villains. This story would be reprinted many times, including Punch Comics number 11 in 1944. Double Action Comics is an Ashcan dated November 1939 from DC Comics. This is a black and white comic in standard Golden Age comic book size. It's printed in Velox cover, and it is just a cheap Ashcan comic, which they used to keep the legal protection for the title Double Action Comics. And the numbering continues with Double Action Comics number 2, which actually came out in 1940. The Ashcan edition created to secure the trademark of title and logo. This is a very rare book and was not ever officially for sale to the public. The cover of this book is drawn by Leo O'Mealia and is reprinted from Adventure Comics number 41, which came out a few months ago at DC Comics. The interior is known to be from the 9th to 16th wraps of Action Comics number 15, and the book is hand-trimmed. Edison, Inspiration to Youth, is a no-number comic book dated November 4th, 1939 by T.A. Edison. This is a one-shot 88-page book which was released on November 4th, 1939, featuring a sepia tone cover and black and white interior. The dimensions are 6.5 by 9.5 inches. It is saddle stitched. This one-shot also has variants that have been published later on. Thomas Edison, the inventor, is featured on the cover in a photo, and this book is all dedicated to his life story called Edison, Inspiration to Youth. It's 78 pages worth of comic book story written by Arthur J. Palmer with art by Frank Kuchenmeister. It's a biographical comic book one-shot, reprinted from The Life of Thomas Edison in Word and Picture and King Features Syndicate newspaper serial, The Life of Thomas Edison, which ran from August to November 1927. It's drawn in Prince Valiant style with words under the pictures. Speed Comics number 2, November 1939, published by Brookwood Comics. The cover is by Maurice Scott, featuring Shock Gibson. There's a Lawson pedigree copy of this book. The editor at Brookwood was Maurice Rosenfield. This early superhero cover does feature Shock Gibson, who also appears in a lengthy 22-page story written by Maurice Rosenfield and Bill Scott, with art possibly by Norman Fallon. This early superhero strip is called Return of Baron von Kampf, who is the villain who appears in this story. Biff Bannon is a 7-page story written and drawn by Dick Briefer, featuring the first appearance of the villain Captain Mooch. Carda the Batwoman is the title of the 4-page Landor Maker of Monsters story, drawn possibly by Gregory Torrey, and features the first appearance and death of the villain Carda. And this is interesting that this Batwoman story would appear only months after the debut of Batman. Spike Marlin is an 8-page story drawn by George Tuska under the alias Carl Larson. 4-Color Comics number 2, November 1939, published by Dell Comics. This is the second issue of the comic industry's longest-running title ever. It features Don Winslow. There's a mile-high pedigree copy of this book in existence. Overstreet considers this book rare. Don Winslow of the Navy is the feature on the cover, and the stories within are written by Lieutenant Commander Frank V. Martinek with art by Leon Baroth. Features the hero Don Winslow and the villain Dr. Centaur, and these are reprinted from the Don Winslow of the Navy comic strips from 1936 to 1938. Keen Comics number 3, November 1939, published by Centaur Publications. This issue went on sale December 19th, 1939. It has a Thanksgiving turkey humor cover. Jack Cole, Carl Burgos, and Ken Ernst all contribute to this issue. The editor at Centaur at this time was likely Joe Hardy. This book was published in standard Golden Age size. And there's a Robert Louis Stevenson comic story running 2 pages in this issue. Magic Comics number 4, November 1939, published by David McKay Publications. Henry is featured on the cover. The editor at David McKay was Marjorie McKay. Mandrake the Magician appears in an 8-page story written by Lee Falk with art by Phil Davis in this early adventure superhero story. Mickey Mouse sometimes appears on the screen as the title of the 2-page story for Seein' Stars, written and drawn by Feg Murray, which is a biographical strip and features a cameo of Disney's Mickey Mouse. And Thimble Theater, starring Popeye, appears in a 4-page strip written and drawn by LZ Cigar, featuring the popular Popeye strip reprints. Mystery Men Comics number 4, November 1939, published by Fox Comics. This issue went on sale September 13th, 1939. The editor at Fox at this time was likely Victor Fox. The dimensions of this book are 7.5 inches by 10 1/4. The Captain Savage features begin. This book features a Lufine cover of the superhero, the Green Mask. Bob Powell and George Tuska also contribute to this issue. The Green Mask story runs 9 pages, drawn by Walter Frame, and features the first appearances of the villains Nikolai and Tony. Captured by Lord Marvel is the title of the 6-page Rex Dexter strip, likely written and drawn by Dick Briefer, and it features the first appearance and death of the villain Lord Marvel. The story would be reprinted in Rex Dexter of Mars number 1 in 1940. Wing Turner is 3 pages, drawn by George Tuska under the alias Floyd Kelly, and features the first appearance of the character Johnson. Bull Thompson the Pirate is the title of the 4-page Captain Savage strip, drawn by Art Petty. This is the first appearance of Captain Savage and of the villain Bull Thompson. This story would be reprinted in The Green Mask number 3 in 1940. Blue Beetle appears in a 4-page story, possibly written by Will Eisner, with art by Charles Nicholas, featuring Dan Garrett as the Blue Beetle, and the first appearance of the villain Bull Blackert, and this story would be reprinted in Blue Beetle number 1 in 1940. Blue Beetle gains his full-sleeved official costume in this story. Zanzibar is a 4-page strip, possibly written by Will Eisner, with art by George Tuska, featuring the first appearance of the villain Simone, and this story would be reprinted in Blue Beetle number 5 in 1940. Smash Comics number 4, November 1939, published by Quality Comics. This issue went on sale September 20th, 1939. The publisher at this time at Quality was Everett Arnold, and the editor was Ed Cronin. There's a mile-high pedigree copy of this book from the Edgar Church collection. Wings Wendell appears on the cover with art possibly by Gil Fox. We also see images of Archie O'Toole, Espionage, Bozo the Robot, the Invisible Hood, and Clip Chance, all in the inset. Madame Doom is the title of the 9-page Espionage starring Black Ace story, written and drawn by Will Eisner in his popular spy story. Black Ace has to deliver Allied agents to a conference in California, and Madame Doom wants to stop him. This is the first appearance of the villain, Madame Doom. The Green Lizard is the title of the 5-page Invisible Justice story, written and drawn by Art Panagian under the alias Art Gordon, featuring Kent Thurston as the Invisible Hood, and the Green Lizard is the villain in this story. The Green Lizard threatens to kill prominent businessmen with crocodiles in a swamp unless they pay him off. This is an early superhero comic strip. The Submarine Disasters is the title of the 7-page Hugh Hazard and his Iron Man story, written and drawn by George Brenner under the alias Wayne Reed. This is an early science fiction comic strip featuring Hugh Hazard and Bozo the Robot. Sheepad Bay is the title of the 2-page Archie O'Toole story, likely written and drawn by Will Eisner under the alias Bud Thomas. Flash Fulton is 4 pages, written and drawn by Paul Gustafson, featuring the debut of Flash Fulton and Rudolph. Flash goes to Europe to get first-hand pictures of the invasion of Serenia. The Impossible Murder is the title of the 7-page John Law Scientective story, written and drawn by Harry Francis Campbell in this detective mystery which features the character The Avenger. And the Avenger threatens 12 of Carter's friends with death in revenge for past wrongs they've committed. Wonderworld Comics number 7, November 1939, published by Fox Comics. The editor at Fox was Victor Fox. This issue went on sale September 25th, 1939. A poll of Golden Age collectors puts this among the top 40 best covers of the Golden Age. Gerber lists this issue as a 7, or scarce, on the rarity scale. The superhero The Flame is featured on the cover with art by Lou Fine. Invasion of the Kikus is the title of the 9-page The Flame story, written by Will Eisner under the alias Basil Barold, with art by Lou Fine, in this early superhero strip featuring Gary Preston as The Flame. This story would be reprinted in The Flame #1 in 1940. The Voodoo Master is the title of the 8-page Yarko the Great Master Magician story, likely written and drawn by Will Eisner, in this superhero tale featuring Yarko and the villain Vladim. In Guatemala is the title of a 6-page Shorty Shortcake story written and drawn by Jerry Iger under the alias Jerry Williams in his humor strip. Tommy Taylor in India is a 2-page text story written by Jerry Iger with art by Bob Powell. The Plot to Take the Philippines is the title of a 5-page strip for K-51 Spies at War, written by Will Eisner under the alias Willis Renzi, with art likely by Bob Powell, featuring the villain Von Diabloff. Diamonds of Death is the title of the 5-page Mobbuster Robinson strip, with art by George Tuska, featuring the first appearance of the villain Coleman. Amazing Man #7, November 1939, published by Centaur Publications. This is the 3rd issue of this title. Bill Everett's classic Golden Age art graces the cover at almost the exact time that his Submariner first appears in Marvel Comics #1 on the newsstands. This issue went on sale October 13th, 1939. There is a Rockford pedigree copy of this book, as well as a Billy Wright pedigree copy and a Mile High pedigree copy from the Edgar Church collection. Eamon the Amazing Man is featured on the cover, drawn by Bill Everett. Amazing Man Loose is the title of the 10-page Eamon the Amazing Man story, written by A.L. Kirby with art by Bill Everett. And it features John Eamon as the Amazing Man in this early superhero strip. Having interfered with the plans of the Great Question, the villain arranges for fake witnesses to claim in court that Eamon forced a car off the road, killing a maintenance engineer. Forced into a cell, Eamon changes into the Green Mist and confronts the witnesses, trying to get them to confess to their treachery. Dinosaur Forest is a 3-page story drawn by Robert Louis Golden. It's a complete novelette, and this is an early dinosaur story in comic books. Dear Reader, in the year 1950 during the Second World War, is the title of the 9-page The Iron Skull story, drawn by Carl Burgos. Origin of the Magician from Mars is the title of the 7-page Magician from Mars strip, drawn by John Giunta in this early science fiction and superhero comic strip, featuring Jane Gem 35 as the Magician from Mars, making the first appearance and origin in this story. The daughter of a Martian father and Earthwoman is accidentally exposed to the rays of a cathode tube by her nurse, which gives her extraordinary powers and advanced mentality. However, her earthly heritage of affection for blood relatives is her one weakness. Miniature Man is a 7-page story written and drawn by John Kolb and would later be known as Mini Midget. Chuck Hardy, Land Beneath the Sea is a 7-page story written and drawn by Frank Thomas. The Mighty Man, a huge 12-foot giant, is the title of the 7-page Mighty Man strip written and drawn by Martin Filchock. The Shark is an amazing undersea creature is the title of the 8-page The Shark strip, written and drawn by Lou Glanzman. This is the 2nd appearance of the Shark comic strip. All-American Comics #8, November 1939, published by DC Comics. This key issue features the first appearance of Ultraman. Mutt and Jeff strips appear 5 times in this issue, plus there is an ad for the Mutt and Jeff comic book from DC. The editor at this time was M.C. Gaines, and Sheldon Mayer was the assistant editor. Gary Concord the Ultraman is featured on the cover, drawn by John Blummer in this early science fiction / superhero cover. Gary Concord the Ultraman appears in a 6-page strip written and drawn by John Blummer under the alias Don Shelby. Gary Concord the Ultraman has his first appearance and origin in this story. Gary Concord's father spent years in suspended animation to awake in the far future of 2239 AD. The story would be continued in the next issue. 1,000 Years a Minute, Part 2 is the title of the 6-page Adventures in the Unknown story, written by Carl Claudy with art by Stan Ashmeyer in this early science fiction comic strip featuring Alan Kane, Ted Oliver, and Dr. Lazar. Popsicle Pete appears in a 2-page story written and drawn by Sheldon Mayer. Pete and his friends plan to build a radio station. A Very Funny Cartoon, To the Right Person, is the title of the 4-page Scribblies story, written and drawn by Sheldon Mayer in his humor strip. Jimmy Stone appears in a 2-page text story written by George Shute with art illustrated by Sheldon Mayer, and there is a promo ad for movie comics in this issue.